see that pop up. All right, here we are. And welcome to the Chicago Marketo Users Group for June 2023. A couple of notes for today. As is typical, this is intended to be a safe space where we can talk about different use cases, ask questions, but really keep this conversation between all of us. So please don't take any information from today's call outside of this group, particularly without the permission of any attendees here. That also includes names, email addresses, contact information, that sort of thing. We want you all to feel safe and welcome, and we're happy you're here. As I mentioned, we are going to be recording this session. If you don't want to be on the recording, you're welcome to be off video or, drop comments in the chat. We're also going to be sending this out. So if you did register for today's session, once this is live on YouTube, I'll send out an email confirmation afterward to everyone that will have a link. So you can always go back and review the information there. If you wanted to be able to take that opportunity to see things that you missed or implement any of that in your own instances or organizations. If you got to this link from somewhere other than Bevy, and you want to make sure you get that, navigate over to mugs.marketo.com. Make sure you sign up for ShyMug. Great thing to be signed up for too, because there will also be a part 2 of today's session that will be coming up on campaign processes. That will be later in July. So I'll have some more information to share on that in just a moment. In addition, other opportunities that are available, certification. If you are working toward that at all, please, I encourage you to do so. It is a fantastic thing for your careers and for your organization. There are a ton of resources out there, as well as some really wonderful folks who would be thrilled to help you along your journey. Now I mentioned that we do have part 2 coming up. So that is going to be Wednesday, July 26th. This will be coming into the Bevy platform probably tomorrow. I'm just getting the final details loaded in at this point. But we will be joined by Natalie Kremer from Atomos, who is the lead or one of the leaders of the North American mug, who's going to walk us through how to create efficient processes for campaign intake. Ties along with really helping to create healthy boundaries and making sure that we're communicating with stakeholders and creating the types of processes for our own mental health and keeping those things in place that for MOPs are going to be key in our roles. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to our incredible speaker for today, Alysha Khan, who has been a consultant with Atomos for 3 years now, and is going to be sharing with us a little bit about stakeholder alignment. Alysha, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Alysha. I've been, as you mentioned, with Atomos for about 3 years, and my specialty at Atomos is campaign operations. So Natalie and I are doing this 2-parter. This month, I'm going to be talking about how to fix your relationship with people. And next month, Natalie will be covering how to fix your campaign ops process. So let me go ahead and I will share my screen here, and then we can get started. Here we go. All right. And slideshow. All right. Can everybody see my screen? Just want to confirm that.
We gotcha.
All right, let's do this. Oh, and I'm going to put the chat there on the side. Sorry, got to reorganize a little. All right. So agenda for today. We're going to do a quick introduction of the topic, and then we're going to define the problem, because that is what we do as good marketing ops people. We always want to define our problems up front. Then we are going to jump into what I call the building blocks of having a good relationship with your stakeholders. And then we're going to dig into some specific strategies for your written communications, your meetings, and your process changes. And then at the end, I'm going to open up the floor so we can talk about any specific people that may have come to mind as we were going through this. If you'd like to brainstorm, we can definitely talk about that. And then I am going to sort of pause for questions throughout, so please just drop those in the chat. And I will answer them as I can. Otherwise, we can also save those for the end. All right, let's get started. So as marketing ops people, managing your stakeholders can feel like a lot of things. For example, it can feel like this. It can kind of feel like this also, or, my personal favorite, at the end of the day with the Slack, and I just see somebody come through and I'm like, no, ma'am, I'm not dealing with you today. And for starters, I want to dig into why it feels like MOPS has a stakeholder problem. And this is because on one side, we have a lot of stakeholders, right? This list here took me probably 15 to 30 seconds to come up with. And I'm sure if we put more time, we could really make this list a bit longer. And all of these people have their own unique set of demands, personalities, politics, needs, wants, desires, blah, 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 right? It is a whole crowd of people on one side asking things from us. And then on our side, we have solo teams, we have small teams, we have understaffed teams. And fundamentally, this also means that we have very limited time, money, political capital, mental bandwidth, overall, just like energy to give to problems. So managing stakeholders, when we say that, what we really mean is how are we going to smartly allocate our limited resources to best serve the business and ourselves? So let's just do a quick outline of the solution that I'm going to talk through today. First, we're going to talk about our 3 building blocks that we want to assemble. First is knowledge of our stakeholders, right? We need to know who our stakeholders are before we can start to figure out what to do with them. Then we need some shiny social capital, because what we're about to do is figure out ways to break some professional norms, some of that social contract, and we need to have some capital to spend in order to do that. And then lastly, we need to decide what boundaries we want to uphold, right? We can't have everything in the world, sadly, unfortunately. So we're going to pick the 2 to 3 boundaries that matter the most to us. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take these building blocks. We're going to use the specific strategies that we're going to talk about later for our meetings, our comms, and our process changes. And we're going to put them together in order to help us uphold our boundaries and thus manage our stakeholders. Now, everything seems very simple in like flowchart form, but we're going to dig into it. And I think I really just love some of these tips and tricks because I've seen them work both with my consulting clients and a lot of the other consultants that we have at Atumos. Okay, but before we begin any of that stuff, the one thing I really want to emphasize with all of you is that we need to believe in our own awesomeness. None of the stuff that I'm about to talk about is going to matter if you don't believe that you have a right to be heard. You have earned a seat at the table. You have a right to protect your time and energy, right? This kind of sounds like rote or silly, but this is actually a really important piece that you are worth putting time and energy into in order for you to be better at what you do, right? So we're going to believe in our own awesomeness. We're going to believe that we have important contributions to make. And now we're going to go ahead and figure out how to manage all of our lovely stakeholders. Okay. Let's jump into our first building block then, which is what I like to call reconnaissance. So like any good MOPS person, we need to collect data before we decide on a solution. And in terms of our stakeholders, what this means is we need to know who we are dealing with and what kind of people they are. We're gonna talk through some examples, but when I say like collect this kind of data, you can go like Amy Santiago and Brooklyn Nine-Nine and probably have like a Rolodex somewhere, or you can just like mentally file this away in the back of your head, right? Choose what you want. And also, I mean, general disclaimer, I'm not saying be creepy about this, but this is important information so we know the kind of people we're dealing with, right? So things that are really helpful to know are their priorities and business objectives, how they prefer to receive information, what modes of communication do they actually respond to, right? Do you have Slack people? Do you have Zoom people? Are they email people? Are they like, will only respond to the third Slack kind of people? It's really helpful to know that kind of stuff, right? So how technically savvy are they? A few more ideas here about like, are they planners? Are they emergency people? Are they flexible? Do we know what motivates them? Are they organized or flying by the seat of their pants? All of these different kind of people will require a slightly different solution, right? So the more we know, the better prepared we can be to handle them. And how are we going to find all this out? We are just going to pay attention to people, right? Because how they interact with you, how they interact with other people, the energy they bring to their meetings, the tone of their communications, that's going to give you a lot of information about what makes them tick. All right. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to keep chugging on. Then our second building block is what I like to call the charm offensive. And this is being literally 10% nicer to everybody. Now, we don't want to go like all Stepford wives on folks, literally just a little bit nicer than you may have been inclined to be otherwise. We've got a lot of reasons listed here. All of these are important, but the most important one is that being that 10% nicer helps you build up that social capital, right? A lot of what we're going to do next is redirecting people, saying no to people in different ways. And when you have a good relationship with people, it makes it a lot easier for you to do that kind of stuff, right? For you to be like, thanks for sending in the question, but I'm going to need you to submit a ticket, then I'll definitely get to it, right? There's a difference when like you guys have a good relationship to make that kind of ask versus you guys are kind of already butting heads. There's some kind of bad vibes. You guys are not assuming the best of each other. Those are going to have two very different outcomes. So we want to start being that like smidgens nicer to people to start building up that good relationship. So some examples here, making an effort to just like chit chat with people. I ask everybody how their day is, week is, weekend is. Do I remember any of these answers? No, but it makes folks feel heard. It makes them feel like, oh yes, she's at least somewhat interested. I try to respond to what they're saying. I also try to like bring your best customer service energy. So even if you may not be able to help people, just trying to be like, oh yeah, I heard you have an issue with X. I really think, Sarah, I'm going to pick on you just because I see your name in my screen. Sarah really knows the answer, right? She can definitely help you. And that's like low effort ways to just be a little bit of a friendlier person. Making an effort to congratulate folks on their wins. This can be as simple as like, maybe if there's like a specific salesperson you're trying to get in their good books, it was like, oh yeah, I heard you hit your quota or goal or, the thing they accomplished, like, congratulations. So, so happy for you. Spreading those positive vibes whenever possible. And then especially for, I think in MOPS, like when people come to us with nonsense ideas, making a little bit of an effort just to humor them, being like, oh yeah, let's talk about that. Let's like see what problem you're trying to solve. Let's just, see what we can do with this idea. Even if in the back of the head, you're like, what are you doing? Why are you like, no, we're not going to do this. That's okay. We're just going to make an effort because that's going to make them feel heard and then make them more likely to sort of cooperate with some of the stuff that we're going to be changing. And then lastly, we're going to talk, we're going to pick our boundaries. So ideally, I usually say like, you need like 2 to 3 good boundaries, 1 personal, 1 professional. Here are a few ideas. But this is like, this list can go on and on, right? So this is just a few things to help you guys start thinking about. It's going to be very like you dependent, very company dependent. So this is literally just like 4 quick ones that kind of apply to me where like, I will eat my lunch every day at my kitchen table, on the dining table. Like I am eating a proper lunch. That is a very like line in the sand for me. I do not let folks like book over that slot whenever because it's important to me. But for things like following your ticket submission process, maybe you're like a 10-person startup, right? Where like, this is not your biggest fish to fry, then like, that's not the right boundary for you to be setting, right? But Maybe you're at a much larger like enterprise SaaS company where your ticket submission process is kind of do or die. So like, yes, then that is the right boundary for you to decide that like, this is the hill we are going to die on. This is what we're going to put our effort into. And this is definitely one of those things, like sometimes I've definitely written it down in like places just that I have a reminder for myself that like, you need to eat lunch today. People like, don't let people go over your tickets. Like everybody needs to submit a ticket. Whatever it is, sort of just like remind yourself like, hey, these are the boundaries we're working on with people. This is what we need to be doing. All right, I'm going to pause here before we move into our next section. Any questions or comments? I don't see any in the chat, but if anybody wants to pipe up, I'm happy to take them. No? Okay, we will cruise on then. All right. So now that we have our building blocks, let's talk about strategies. And the energy I really want us to channel is from Taylor Swift. We are only cryptic and Machiavellian because we care, right? So a lot of this is going to feel a little awkward and weird and like, what am I doing? But we're going to be cryptic. We're going to be Machiavellian because we care about ourselves. We care about the business and we want to do what is best for everybody. All right. So some general strategies. Okay. So the tone we usually want to convey in most of our communications is that I am making a very reasonable request of you. So of course you are going to comply, right? It's the difference between like, can you pretty please submit a ticket versus, hey, submit a ticket and then I'll get to it, right? We are assuming compliance that like, yes, we're both reasonable, pleasant people. Of course you're going to do the thing because it's a very reasonable request from you. That tone makes a difference, right? Because it's very easy when we're frustrated, when we're annoyed to come off as like a little snippy, a little short with people. And so having this tone in the back of your head of like, we are both two reasonable people, and of course we're going to come to a reasonable solution can often help mitigate some of that. The next thing is we are not going to be afraid to be a broken record. When I've done this with clients, it feels obnoxious. It feels very weird and awkward, but I will say it works, right? So when somebody engages in a behavior you don't want, we want to make it an unsatisfying experience. So classic example, slacking you a request instead of submitting a ticket. We're not going to respond to the Slack. We're just going to be like, yo, thanks for this, but please submit a ticket and then I'll get to it. And then once they submit the ticket, you really want to reward the positive behavior that's happening and work to create that positive feedback loop. So what this means is that once that ticket is in your system, you're going to really try hard to drop some kind of an update, even if that update is just like confirming I got it, I'll get to it on Tuesday. It's a non-response, but it still confirms that somebody did the process and they got the gold star, right? You want to be really, really conscientious about handing out those gold stars when people are doing the thing that you want them to do. Because then that creates that positive feedback loop, and eventually the stuff they'll default to that instead of sending you the Slacks. Then it's making sure that you are using the right channel. Depending on the person, depending on the topic, some things are better for email, others are for Slack, others are for meetings. You will know based on the reconnaissance we've been doing how you need to engage with this person, right? And we'll get a little bit more specifically into that as we go on. So next up is, let's get specifically into written communications. So to save yourself time, we're going to keep templatized versions of our most common responses. And we're going to keep links to the most helpful resources we have lined up, right? So links to documentation people may need. Maybe there's the the link to how they can submit the JIRA ticket. We're going to keep all of that stuff really handy somewhere so we are not eating into our own time to enforce our boundaries, right? So I keep going back to the ticket example. So let me just come up with a different one. If somebody always is like, can you adjust this chart for me? No, but here's the help desk article. Here you go. If you actually need more help, submit the ticket, right? So having those kind of things quick and handy will make managing people and sending them in the right direction a lot easier. Then we're going to really think about the information we are giving people in terms of the format, amount, and depth, right? And this is again where that reconnaissance is really going to come in handy, because some people just want to know that like the thing they asked is done, right? And writing them a giant essay is going to waste your time, waste their time. They're never going to respond. We don't need to, right? Unless it is, of course, for like, you need to document it for future purposes, and that's one thing. But some folks just literally want to know, like, you did the thing? Did you do the thing? Yes, yes. Okay, good. We're done. Others will want details, right? Others will want details that they can self-serve themselves in the future, or will want a full explanation. And then it's much better to spend your energy on the people who will like take your information and appreciate your information versus the folks that won't want it. And then there are others that really like, you realize that like they respond better to bullets, or other people really want essays. And again, this is how we save ourselves that time, because maybe you look back on a ticket and you're like, wow, had I given him the 4-paragraph essay up front, I wouldn't have spent 5 days going back and forth with him, right? I could have just given it to him given him all the information he wanted up front. Next time we know that like, yep, it's John again. We're going to give him all the nitty gritty stuff up front, and this is going to go a lot faster. Then we also want to adjust the information we provide based on the personalities of our stakeholders. And I'm also going to caveat this with like, I'm not saying to withhold information, but often that first communication can really set the tone for how the rest of the conversation goes. So providing the right amount of information can really help, right? So some folks will find problems where there are none if you give them too much, right? So you really need to figure out what is the right amount to give them. So that way you get what they need, they get what they need, the problem gets solved, and like, we haven't opened up like a random can of worms that didn't even need to be a can of worms, right? Others will be like, yo, this is way too much technical information. I just really like need the bare bones, bare minimum, right? So it's dialing down the tech speak to like regular person language of like, click the button in the left-hand corner and it will do the thing. Level of thing, right? So just really dialing in that level of information can make a huge difference to how you are managing them and how often they are coming back to you to get more info, or how long the conversation is dragging on, etc. Then we always want to make sure you have a next step outlined in any comms. Now, a lot of times what I see is that like the next step is kind of implicit. So in the first example where I wrote bad, like here's the email asset for your review. It is pretty implicit, and like most people would kind of understand that they need to send back an approval or edit. But there's always going to be that one person who like skates right past that and is like, yep, reviewed, done, check, all in their head. They're never going to write a single thing back on the ticket, and you will like never hear from them for another 2 weeks until they're like, why didn't you send out my email? So even if it is like implicit, you're going to want to make that explicit so they know that the next step sits with them or with somebody else or whoever, right? So back to the email asset, let me know if you have any edits or if this is approved, right? Then it's really clear that like they need to provide you with something in order for the next step to take place, right? So writing that down really helps. And oftentimes I even catch myself doing this where like I have to read back my writing and be like, would like somebody just randomly walking into this be able to understand who owned the next step, right? Or what the next deliverable was. And if that isn't clear, then I like throw in the extra sentence to be like, Stacy, you need to give me the thing, please and thank you, or I need this approval by such and such date, right? So it's really easy to miss, but this can also often make a really big difference in stuff just lingering and sitting out there for no reason. Then I love a good emoji, especially if you're being a broken record with people or you're like telling somebody to knock it off. A little smiley face helps, a little like, depending on the circumstance, like a little fun, the little rainbow characters helps. It helps you keep the tone friendly and conversational while still being like, yo, no, not okay. But then ultimately, we always want to keep an eye out for when conversations need to be moved from writing to some meetings. But before I get into meetings, any quick questions about writing stuff or written stuff? I don't see any in the chat, but no. Okay, let's cruise on. All right, meetings. Have an agenda. Even if you've literally just like scribbled it down on a sticky on your desk, have an agenda so that way you know what you need to accomplish from the other people in your meeting. So have an agenda. Then I am a huge fan of the 15-minute sync. So for some people, 15 minutes talking it out will solve it way faster than like any email or Slack, right? It's that moment where you find yourself writing that essay and you're like, dear God, you know, maybe we just need to talk this out for 15 minutes, right? Versus you spending 5 days going back and forth and writing like 5 different essays to this person. We're going to grab 15 minutes on their calendar. The other trick of the 15 minutes is I find that a lot of people just like being offered it, that they don't actually want to grab it with you, but they just, it makes them feel important and feel better. Like, oh, she's opening up my calendar. Or she's opening up her calendar to me. And that'll just be like, oh, I don't like, let me just agree to a solution to get this moving along, right? So 15 minutes, it can feel a lot for some calendars, but really think about it in terms of like, is it 15 minutes on my calendar or like 5 days of writing answers back and forth in email or Jira or whatever and getting increasingly annoyed? The 15 minutes is often a lot faster and a lot less painful. I also love a good working session, if only to force all the relevant people into the same room and to get some decisions made, right? And this is also where having an agenda, super helpful, super necessary. I have often helped my clients wrangle their own internal people into a meeting because MOPS technically doesn't need to do anything for another 3 steps in the process, but like the earlier step still hasn't gotten sorted and they just need somebody to put the people in the room in order to get it figured out, right? So think about working sessions as just like another tool in your toolkit of like, if all of these people are dragging their feet left and right, nobody's giving you what you need or making the decision that needs to be made in order for you to do what you need to do, put them together in a Zoom room, have a really crystal clear agenda about what decisions need to be made. And it can often have some really good results that way. Then we all have people who we just know that they are not going to read the email or even digest the email, or it's just not going to like register with them. Putting a catch-up time on their calendar can often be helpful, right? And again, the way to think about this is like, do we want to be annoyed at them for a week, 2 weeks as they like don't read the email or don't follow the instructions? Or do we just want to like quickly corral them in a corner, get what we need, and everybody moves on with their lives? Same thing. If you also have stakeholders who you keep setting up ad hocs with, setting up a recurring time can also be helpful, because then you're not like randomly trying to corral them for random stuff. You have a dedicated time where you can go in with your list and be like, okay, this is what I need from you this week. Let's like knock it out, and then we can all move on with our day. And then for any and all meetings, please, 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 always, always, always send a follow-up email or Slack with decisions made, tasks assigned, who's doing them, and any other next steps or deadlines, right? I have even like, as I am talking, just like pulled up my Slack on the side and started writing it out and tagging people. So we are doing it pretty much live. This step is critical, right? Because none of the other stuff about meetings is going to matter if we don't do that quick follow-up to make sure that there's like documentation of what has happened. And then lastly, some strategies for process changes. So, for process change, which I know in MOPS we really end up doing a lot of, is the key is to focus on how your stakeholders will benefit. And this is going back to that reconnaissance to find the right lever to pull, right? So for a process change, a salesperson is going to have a different lever than like a demand gen person, than like content or web. And it's finding the right way to convince people that they need to do the thing, right? From the way that they will see it as a benefit to them. The other thing about process changes is being ready to communicate it in multiple ways and multiple times in multiple places. And I think the reason we often get frustrated with this is like, we are not prepared for this, right? So when all of our stakeholders come talking to us about like, oh, I didn't really read it, I don't understand it, I missed the email completely, we're not really anticipating that, and we're not always prepared to be handling those kind of like on the fly questions, right? But if we know in advance that we're going to have to badger people about this, that we're going to have to create lots of resources, lots of opportunities to talk about it, that's going to create a lot less stress on us in managing all of those people, because now we have a plan in place, we have resources built out, we have a place to send people like a help desk channel. We are now ready for that instead of being reactive to whatever happens. Similarly, especially for process changes, there are always a few people we know who literally will not pay attention, right? You could be banging pots and pans from the roof of the building and they'll be like, oh, what a lovely day, there's nothing happening. Have a plan in place for them specifically, right? So maybe that's like an ad hoc sync with them, maybe that's a separate, like you Slack them one-on-one about something, you know them, so figure out how you're going to get them to pay attention, right? And then if you have stakeholders who you know will be resistant to a change, doing like a soft launch or an initial round of review with them is often really helpful. And the language around that is often like, we know this is really important to you, so I wanted you to give you a chance to get a first look at this and incorporate your feedback, right? You want to make them feel special about this. And we can get there, we will get feedback. Maybe it's stuff you've already thought of, maybe it's stuff you know you have to ignore, maybe there will be good stuff in there, right? But the key is to make them feel special about it and have them feel like, oh yes, we're on the same team, we're working to solve the same problem. And that is all that I have for today. So from here, I kind of wanted to open it up to the floor to see if there's any specific stakeholder problems that folks wanted to talk through, or just any questions in general about some of the stuff, or specific examples, any of that. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and get a sip of water really fast.
I just wanted to say thank you, because so many of these little things, I feel, I know that I am guilty of regularly overlooking or rushing through and not having them top of mind. And I think that this is a really great reminder of stringing the pieces together and really being able to make that work in your favor. I loved the idea that you had about templatizing the responses, because I feel like templatization is so much of what we do in marketing ops, but I've never even thought to have like a response library like that.
I think that's what, like, when Natalie and I started talking about this, it is often all of those little pieces, right? That we're not used to thinking about them as like, how can I use all of these little tools to like convince this person to essentially leave me alone in some very nice capacity, right? So I'm really glad you guys like the end. We've also tried this on our consultants, so on our clients with our consultants. So I can definitely report that response library is super helpful. The 15 minutes thing, I have found that to be honestly so magical that like so many people just like knowing they can get on my calendar. Very few of them do. But for some reason, it makes them feel very special. They're like, oh, but okay, it's fine. We'll give you what you want, or we'll do it your way, instead of arguing with you over Jira for 5 days. So
I love that. Oh my God, Jira tickets.
Jira is the one that I have slight PTSD from working in. Asana doesn't give me that many flashbacks, but Jira does.
From the group here, who all is working out of some sort of a ticket system? Jira, Asana, Basecamp, anything like that?
So I unfortunately work out of all 3 of those.
Wow. Okay.
Depending on the day, but I can say like one of the, like I'm primarily out of Asana, but one of the things you said, I have found to be tremendously helpful, which is to always give the person like next steps. So like, thank you, for your time today. Here's this widget for your review. Like the next thing on the list for this widget is I need you to review and approve it by, end of Tuesday, right? And I find that that works way, way better than saying like, I just need you to review it. Thanks. And they will take like 4 years to do it. So
Yeah. I even like, 3 years later, literally, I think this week I was writing something and I was like, oh, there's no next step here for anybody, not me, not them. This is just going to literally go into the ether. So I think, and I love your point that it gives you a chance also to think about what you actually need and like what your own deadlines are, right? Of like, yes, I need this by Thursday because I need this by Thursday for your reasons, but I really love that. Is it Jeff or Geoff?
Jeff Krajewski.
Jeff. Yes, Jeff. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
How do you feel about Basecamp for MOPS? I used it in a previous life at a startup, but I haven't seen it much in MOP circles.
Yeah, I'm using it on a certain client. It's okay. I mean, it provides the insights, and if you have the notifications set with according to your desire, it's all right, but it can definitely overwhelm, I would say. There's a lot that I've got in my instance going on, so it can be all over the place, but if you have a good PM, then things are usually in a good spot.
Exciting. Thanks. I feel like my preference has always been Asana because it's so easy to set up and get online. Asana or Rike. I do like Rike a lot, but I feel like Jira is the one where it's not like a good fit, or it's like not easy to stand up for folks as some of the other tools.
yeah, I find Jira is largely used by our IT team, and like that works for them. For development, what kind of like what Michelle is saying. But it is really easy to lose, at least for me, it's really easy to lose like where things go. And it's not straightforward, which is why like day to day, I much prefer Asana. And I used Basecamp in a previous life as well, like heavily. And I will say like Asana seems to be a lot easier to come up to speed on.
I would agree with that.
Asana is just, I feel like people get it more quickly. Like there's less explaining that we have to do. The other one that I'm curious if folks have used this, and at this point, I'm just being nosy and curious. So if somebody has a real question, I'm happy to address that. Monday.com drives me bonkers because I think the vertical scrolling is really obnoxious, but I'm wondering if anybody has seen like a really nice instance of Monday. Maybe I'll just continue hating Monday.com on my own. It's fine.
I've used it on a client too, but same thing. I was working in all of Monday and Trello and Asana and Jira and Basecamp. Everybody was on something different. So, well, opening it up to everybody on the call. Does anyone have tips that they would like to share on how you have managed stakeholder relationships or boundaries or communication within your own teams that you think could benefit the group?
Just one thing I'll throw out there is managing your own time. And anyone following some other groups in MOPS, I've seen it here and there, and it's a big conversation because, we've heard the Josh Hills of the world say, I only check my email 3 times a day, and here are the exact times, and it's for the purposes of productivity. So by managing expectations or setting appointment blocks to certain times of the day, managing how many meetings you take in a single day, and these types of concepts are what keep us sane as MOPS practitioners.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I love the idea of meeting blocks, because I feel like that helps you then decide who's going to get your time, and you can strategically use it to corral the necessary people. And I'm unfortunately the person who checks their email all the time. I may not respond to you all the time. I will check it though to make sure there's nothing on fire. But then it's like nope, I'm going to respond to you at a time that is convenient. So I think you're right about just like good email and Slack management as well.
Yeah, I was going to tack on to that I find that one of my main things that I've had to start doing over the years is like, really, if I get into a meeting and it's just like a meeting for the sake of a meeting, just cutting it off and being like, hey, okay, what are our action items out of this? Nobody knows. Okay, I'm going to give everybody our time back or I'm going to drop, because like there is no point in all of us sitting in a Zoom room to go back and forth on the same 5 things we've been talking about for the last 3 weeks. It doesn't help. So I find that usually if I do that in a non-abrasive way, that people are pretty receptive to it, because nobody really wants to be stuck in a meeting, but it takes somebody actually like putting their foot down and saying, all right, guys, we're not going to get anywhere today. Here's what we need to do and come back to this. Like, so
I really love that. And I have a few PMs who I bother routinely of like, do you need me on this call? I see you put me on this call, but like, do you need me on this call? And good 60% of the time, the answer is no, you're just there in case. And I'm like, great. I'm saying no to it, but like, if something changes, let me know and I'll try to join then if I can. So very aggressively just curating my calendar. I'm sorry, Brooke.
And then I was going to ask if anybody has any kind of experience with gatekeeping your calendar, especially when you are working cross-functionally with teams in different time zones. So that's a large part of my pain points right now, is that I'm in Washington, D.C. and heavily working with a group in Switzerland. And so it's like, they have a tendency to, like, the second my calendar opens up for the day at 7 a.m., they start booking meetings. And it's like, because they only have, 4 hours before they really log off for the day. So does anybody else kind of deal with that?
I'll come off mute and on video here because I deal with this a lot. My calendar literally has a repeated daily out of office at the beginning and end of my days, so that if someone tries to book me for something, they get an automatic out of office reply. Sorry, not sorry, I ain't here. And I start that through the first 30 minutes of my day. So I actually have time to get in, check my email, go through all my Slack channels, do all the things I need to do to actually dive into my day. I might accept an internal meeting or something that I need to get my day started, but that doesn't show up on my Calendly, is what it is. And I also use Calendly to gatekeep how far out meetings are available. So no one can book me within a 4-hour window of now. Like, no.
That's nice. I I wish we utilized that.
Yeah, no, Calendly is honestly a godsend. I also block my calendar religiously. Like it literally says do not book over. And then, but the thing is, there are other slots where I will write like ask before booking over, so it makes people feel like there are options. The other thing we've done for some international teams is, and this was like independent of circumstance, is maybe just setting up either a recurring time or letting them know that like, hey, I'm dedicating this 2-hour block to you, right? Once you've gotten through your stuff, this is your 2 hours. I can either take meetings or do tickets or whatever, but like, this is your designated zone. Let's keep that clear for ourselves, right? So giving them a yes instead of giving them like all the no's all the time.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
I was just going to add, so obviously a person in marketing ops, so much of it has to do with the amount of time you have in the day to take everybody's either order. I don't like to call them orders, but sometimes it feels like that, and or the insights they need. We do use recently at our company on Microsoft Teams, so I don't know if anybody else is on Teams. There is something called Viva Insights. Okay. So that little tool just recently started using, but it's nice because it suggests like times you take breaks or have focus time. So it'll block your calendar for you. So I think it looks 7 days in advance. And if there's like a chunk of like an hour, it'll pre-block it. So then nobody's going to schedule that, or technically they can, but you know. So I've only started using that probably in the past 45 days or so, but it's a really nice thing. And it reminds you of things that like via email, if you didn't respond, things like that. So another little tip.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Actually, I had forgotten about the Viva Insights thing.
I know apparently Calendly also has a free version, Sarah. So that might be
Good to know.
you to bust that out for yourself.
Yeah, so we don't have Calendly for our org, but it was something that I had when I was back in the agency, and it was the first thing I set up actually when I came over to my new company. The difference with the free version is you can only have one time block size available at a time. So I typically have mine set to 30 minutes as a default, because I feel like that's a pretty consistent one, but it's so much easier when you're trying to book meetings with external stakeholders, just to be like, here's what's available, but you can put in there what they can actually have access to and when. So what's your availability like? And that way you can kind of control that too and make the back and forth easier. But yeah, you can flip it down to like a 15-minute or 30, 45, an hour, whatever you want it to be. But yeah, it's the basic one's good.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like all of my requests for my time are internal stakeholders. So that doesn't quite work, but I like the idea that Michelle threw out, because I'd forgotten that like we operate with Microsoft 360 or whatever. So yeah, the Viva Insights thing, I think it's basically like machine learning. Like it kind of looks at your calendar and also pings you on like if somebody's tagged you in a shared document, like, or assigned something to you. So that's not a bad idea. Thank you for all of y'all's help and discussion.
I got one other thing that I do. On my team, I have another team that frequently will need me, and they'll need me like last minute. And so for those, and I know someone talked about having like a window where they're available, but I actually keep a standing meeting with my Zoom, and they own it. I transfer it to it, make them the owner, and then they cancel it if they don't need it. But if they do, then they're not slacking me random. They know they have that slot with me to address whatever it is. And it controls the chaos a little bit too, as far as how, and because they know they have that. And it gets canceled 9 times out of 10. But that 10th time, like,
Great. And that's the other thing I love about blocks is like, just because you have a block for X thing, that's really like, and I say external, I mean anybody but you, that's like their view. You can frankly do whatever you want. If there's nothing to do for that person during that block in this example, like you can do whatever you want, but it's just there. So that way your stakeholder knows that like, yes, I have reserved time. I have reserved availability during this period.
if you have an internal team that can see your calendar and they can see what's going on and they will double book you, I also recommend this happens to me, and has happened at previous organizations. Find a buddy in the organization that you would have a reason to be meeting with and book that time, with a link for your meeting previously agreed upon with them that neither of you are going to show up. And then other people look at that and go, that's an internal meeting, must be critical. They're not available then, instead of it just being like block or working time or block for project. Like, people will book over that crap in a minute. But if they see you with a Zoom link or whatever and somebody else, they tend to leave it alone.
That's too funny because yeah, I absolutely run into that.
Oh yeah. I have several hours on my calendar where it's like, I will not be talking to that person, but they are locked up on my calendar.
I just love people who have the gall to double book. And I'm like, did you not, like, you clearly you read the thing, you understood the thing, and you decided to just blow right past it. And I'm like,
Oh,
no,
I get triple booked.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, heaven forbid I forget to accidentally put like 30 minutes on my calendar to go pick up a kid from school because like it's like, well, you didn't block your calendar. Well, sorry, I didn't realize you were going to hunt for the exact 5 minutes I was not in a meeting today to like, you know, put me in another meeting. Like it's ridiculous.
I just join those calls from my crappy cell phone reception in the car and have them learn the hard way, and then they don't book me at that time anymore.
See, that I actually have a hard rule that I will not put work on my personal phone. So I do not check email. I do not check Teams. I do not have any of it linked to my phone. You can't find me. Those who need my number have my number. And like, that's it. But like, because I'm that person that like you, Alysha, I will literally just be constantly like, oh, did a fire come up? Oh, did a fire come up? And I can't turn it off. So that's my only way to turn it off.
No, I have no notifications on my phone, so that way I can check when I need to if I'm out. Also, our agency is a little bit more flexible, so like I find it helpful to be able to check when I need to, because like if I'm out puttering around somewhere, it's like, oh wait, I actually probably should go back to my desk and like deal with the problem. But I have notifications turned off. You can't get me. Like
my hack is I have the Outlook app on my phone and the Gmail app on my phone. And Gmail is for my personal mail and Outlook is for work mail, because I can shut those off separately now.
yes. Oh, that's
So when I go into personal focus, I have everything on my phone. I have Teams, I have 8x8, which is our phone system. I have Outlook. When I set my iPhone to personal focus, all that stuff gets shut off.
nice.
But I still have my Gmail is unaffected. I don't even use Apple Mail except to check what I send things from Marketo to see what it looks like in Apple Mail. But yeah, that's my way of keeping it all on my phone, but still separable.
Yeah.
If I need it to be.
No, that's a really good trick.
And the other is to always remember to put absolutely everything on your work calendar. Your dentist appointment, your picking up kids from your school. I forget it all the time. And then somebody books over like, but just put like, you don't even have to put what it is, just put out of office or OOO, which is awesome. Because when Siri reads it back to you, it's like in 15 minutes. Ooh. But yeah, but if it's just put it on the calendar, you don't have to tell people what it is. Be like, I'm not available. What am I doing? Don't worry about it.
I love that because I also do that. I even have like morning walk with coffee. Like I have sometimes just all those 15 minutes that I need in the day, and it's all on my work calendar. So that way I know that it's there and folks can't bother me.
Another little tidbit hint is if you have a Google Calendar, then integrating with Slack, if your org allows it, is awesome, so that you get the alerts right there. And then in your Slack channel for Google Calendar, you can integrate Drive, Zoom, all of these third parties. They play together well. So definitely look into the integrations.
There's a bunch of calendar integrations.
You also have the ability to, in Asana, since so many people are using Asana, to set an away status your out of office in Asana as well as in Outlook. I think there's a way to use Microsoft Power Automate to just set everything automatically. I've not figured it out yet. So that's like one manual thing I got to do every time I go on vacation. But yeah, that does help. It's like then somebody sends you frantic messages in Asana and they get a little notification like, I'm not here, go away.
See you next time.
I've taken to when I'm on PTO, not only do I have my out of office on my Outlook, but I will change my display name right in Slack. So as soon as somebody goes to look for me, it immediately says Brooke Bartos is on PTO. So like, don't even try to Slack me, because people will still send Slack notifications when you're marked as away, unless you've got something there. So I changed the name itself so that it's right there front and center. Well, I know we are at the top of the hour. Did anybody else have any other ideas or suggestions they wanted to bring to
I
the
got
table?
one more thing.
Yes.
You can manage and guard your time by choosing how and when people receive responses from you, so as not to give the appearance of being available outside of the times you want to be. And what I mean by this is, if you're in Slack, you're in Gmail, various applications, if you, even on your phone, if you hold the send button down on Slack, it will give you the option to send that message later. So there's something top of mind, you just want to send it, but you don't either want to barrage your team at 11 o'clock at night, or you don't want to give the appearance of being available usually at 11. You hold that down and change the send time, it will show up at 9 a.m. or whenever you want it to go. And in that way, you reinforce the idea that you're not available, even though you're getting work done when you can or need to.
That's a good one.
I love it. I love scheduling messages because I'm that person who's like doing some stuff after the baby's gone down, because it's like the only quiet time I have in the day. But it's like, I don't know, nobody needs to know that I'm around right now.
Or I have my cell with me and I'm like, thought, right? And it's whatever time it is. Yeah.
Well, it's been fantastic. And if anybody has any more questions, I'm around on Mops Pros or LinkedIn, and you guys can find me there.
Awesome. Thank you all
Thanks
so
so
much,
much.
Alysha. Thank you. This was wonderful. Appreciate you all being here. Hope to see you on July 26th for our next session. Have a good one.
Bye.